It should.
Good afternoon. I would like to call to order this regular board meeting of the North County Transit District for December 19th, 2019. I would like Anthony, the clerk of the board, to call roll.
Yes, sir. Jack Feller. Tony Krantz.
Here.
John Franklin. Paul McNamara. Jim Desmond. Dave Druker. Jewel Edson. Sharon Jenkins. Priya Bapatel.
Okay, thank you. And if you'll all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Anthony will now provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
Yes, sir. In the event of an emergency, I will dial 911. In the event of evacuation, please do so using the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once outside, please do not re-enter the building unless told to do so by emergency personnel. We have fire extinguishers on each floor of this building and a portable defibrillator on the first floor. We also have staff on hand trained on CPR procedures. That concludes my safety brief, sir.
Thank you. And Anthony, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda, sir. However, there is one minor note for agenda item 15. Attachment 15E was updated to reflect updated names to the bridges. No dollar amounts were changed or no other substantive changes, sir.
Okay, thank you. We have one public speaker today. And if Helen Bourne could come to the podium. Good afternoon, Helen. I just saw you last night.
I'm Helen Bourne, and I live in Encinitas. And I came today, okay, thank you. I came today to urge you to create rapid bus service, particularly at night and on the weekends when coaster service is limited. We on the coast between Oceanside and Solana Beach, you know, if you take the last train downtown, you can't get back home. I do ride Rapid Route 235 from Escondido Transit. It's wonderful, but living in Encinitas, I have at least an hour and a half unless I drive, and I'm really concerned about reducing my vehicle miles traveled. So I urge you to think in terms of rapid bus service. It would be really effective. I also want to say thank you for the excellent way NCTD acted with MTS to shuttle people from Solana Beach downtown during the track problems or track fixes. And I was there on November 30th, and it was wonderful. It was really impressed me to come today and ask for rapid bus service because Route 101 is wonderful, and it brought me here, and it'll take me back home. But it is a local route. And we could really use a rapid bus service. It would be, I would think, cost effective, and it's so easy, and it's wonderful. And it would also do more as you electrify the buses. It would do more to, reduce the emissions. So anyway, anything you can do to bring that about, coordinate with MTS. We really need rapid service between coastal North County and downtown because, there's no way to get home at night. We're sort of stuck unless we drive. So anyway, that's what I came to say. And I really appreciate all the improvement you're doing. And anyway, happy holidays to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. All right, moving on. Item A, minutes for the special and regular board meetings of November 21st. Do I have a motion for approval? All right, a motion by board member Edson and a second by Vice Chair Feller. We get this man a microphone.
On the motion of Board Member Jewel Edson, second by Board Vice Chair Jack Feller to approve the minutes of the special and regular board meetings held on November 21st, 2019. Motion passes with all board members present voting yes. Board members Juger and Franklin absent.
Okay, thank you. Now on to a very pleasant agenda item, employee service recognition. And Karen Tukolsky, the Chief Administrative Officer, will review this item.
Good afternoon, board members. Thank you again for having us. Joining me for this presentation is Ray Robinson. Ray is the general manager for MV Transportation here in Oceanside. So before we dive into the presentation itself, we have a video that we want to show you. It showcases these fine individuals that we're recognizing today who have 35 years or more of service with NCTD and our community. So we're going to go ahead and start off with the video.
I'm a Tech 2 with NCTD.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Harris,
My name is Joanne Tua. My name is Sharon Borbeau.
Operations Manager of the East Division.
I'm a dispatcher. I'm a dispatcher.
Favorite part of my job is troubleshooting and tracking down the problem, like a crime scene and determining what was wrong.
The favorite part of my job is to ensure that the operators are happy and they want to come to work.
Favorite part about my job is I really like the people. After doing it so many years, they've become friends, acquaintances. Favorite part of my job is interacting with my peers and assisting any operators with any questions they may have. Working graveyard, what I do is I enter all the data from the day before into the computer for payroll reasons. Then I get the lineup and I try to place buses on all the routes so that every route is filled and we have service in the morning. Well, the main goal is to keep rubber to the road, keep the buses rolling, covering runs, doing positive check-ins every day.
My position as it is now incorporates bumper to bumper, anything that should arise during the course of a day, whether it's troubleshooting or heavy maintenance.
My responsibilities are to handle the day-to-day operations for the Breeze side. I also supervise the supervisors and the dispatch supervisors, the OCC supervisors. The advice I would give someone that is starting out in my position would be to be open and be friendly, allow people to get to know you, go out and socialize with the drivers and the dispatchers and the supervisors. Allow them to get to know you is really a good asset to be successful in this position.
The advice that I'd give to somebody who's stepping into the position is be honest. Be honest and be fair and don't play favorites. My best advice for someone coming into this position is to take lots of notes.
The advice I would give a new person coming to this job is learn all that you can, whether it's going to a local college or through other means. Get as much experience as you can. When I'm not working, I like to garden, work in the yard, go to the gym, take my Jeep out to the desert.
What do I like doing? Is being with my grandchildren. When I'm not working, I like to go to my grandson's football games because he's a star.
What I like to do outside of work is to hang out with my family. We always have a great time when we're together. We laugh a lot. We joke a lot with each other. I started working here by coming up here with a friend of mine from San Diego. He was interested in the job. He talked me into putting in for the job. And he's still waiting on them to give him a call 39 plus years later.
The reason why I feel I'm successful, especially in the graveyard shift, is that I don't play favorites. I assign buses according to routes, not according to people. The secret to my success is treating people with respect as you would want to be treated.
The secret to my success and longevity here is that I love what I do. And it's easy to come to work when you love what you do.
I think the secret is I don't mind coming to work. I enjoy my work as a mechanic. I always did. I never had a problem getting up and going to work. So that's my secret weapon is enjoying my job.
that's the first time you all got to see that. Thank you for that. Hopefully, you think we did you justice. All right. So Ray and I are going to go through a presentation here. I'm going to give just a little bit of information about background, and then we're going to introduce folks one by one and give you a little bit more information about them and about their contributions to the district. So you know a little bit about North County Transit already, but just a quick reminder that we originally formed in 1975 under Senate Bill 802. And then in 2005, we shortened our name after 30 years of a super long name. We shortened our name down to the North County Transit District, which is, of course, what we still go by today. Our mission is to deliver safe, convenient, reliable, and user-friendly public transportation services. And our current ridership is about 10.4 million annually. So we have different services. Starting first back in 1976 is our Breeze and Flex service. We have current boardings of about 6.4 million, and our ridership since inception is approximately 286 million. Very, very significant. So Lyft began services in 1993. Our current ridership is about 169,000, and our ridership since inception is approximately 2.8 million. On the rail side, we have our Coaster Commuter Rail service approaching its 25th year anniversary28 up next year. We began in 1995. Current ridership is about 1.4 million, and we've served approximately 28 million riders since inception. And then our newest service, the Sprinter, that just celebrated its 10-year anniversary in 2018, has current annual ridership of about 2.4 million and ridership since inception of approximately 28 million. So as you can see, we have a lot of important services that we are providing out there to the community. And the reason we're able to provide them is because of the people. And this is a really great chart because it really does show all about the people that we have out there every day who are making this happen for our community and for our passengers. So we have both direct and contracted staff, as you're all aware. Our operational services are contracted out currently with Bombardier and MV Transportation. And these individuals that you see here, of course, just based on the tenure of the Breeze service, are with our MV Transportation bus operations contract. And that is the largest portion, as you can see in the pie chart, of our employees, and as you can also see from the services as well. And then just a breakdown of our district personnel, direct employees on the right. So again, this is really about the people, because without them, none of those other things are happening out there. And so we just want to remind everybody why it's so important and so meaningful for us to do employee recognition. It's a very small and nowhere near equates to the amount of contributions they make, but it's a small way of us demonstrating our appreciation to them for their contributions to NCD, TD, and to our contractors and to the public. Letting people know that we do appreciate them also helps us promote their retention of highly qualified and dedicated employees, which in turn rolls back around to the customers having a positive customer experience because people are feeling good, and you see that in your interactions with them as they're out there communicating with our customers. And it also gives us a chance to connect our frontline employees with you all as board members, because we know that you all support everything that they do, but you don't necessarily have that opportunity to see them day to day and pass your appreciation on to them. So this is an important step for us to make sure that you have the opportunity to let them know how much you support them as well. So with that, we're going to do some presentations here, and I'm going to let Mr. Robinson give a little bit of background on each employee, make the presentation, and we are going to start with Joanne Tua.
Yes, good afternoon, Ms. Joanne.
Yes.
Can you step up?
Going
Going to take notes. So Ms. Joanne joined NCTD in 1984. Joanne has served our riders for 35 years. She started out as a coach operator driving the GMC buses. Even though the buses did not have power steering back then, she was able to provide great service to our bus riders throughout the years. Now, Joanne is our morning dispatcher responsible for the midday assignments of drivers. I want to thank you, Joanne, for fantastic work and the work you do every day.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next is Ms. Kathleen Oliver. Ms. Kathleen could not be here today. We are recognizing her for 38 years as a coach operator and a service that she provided to our riders Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, Miss Cynthia Harris, could you step up? So Miss Harris joined NCTD in 1980. Miss Cynthia has serviced our riders for 39 years. She started out as a coach operator where buses had manual transmissions, double clutch, and no power steering.
No power steering.
Now,
I was the child prodigy.
now Miss Cynthia is the operation manager at our Escondido division. Thank you for handling the operations and the good care that you give to our employees and riders. Thank you. Ms. Cynthia. Got a badge for you? There you go. Go ahead. Say some remarks.
Okay, I will. Since my coworkers voted me the one to speak, they know I love them, okay? And I was sitting up here looking at the video, and I promised I wasn't gonna, tell all the war stories, and I'm not, but we sound like triplets. You know what I mean? Because we didn't see each other's video, but how we were trained when we all came here and to have done most of the jobs in operation. My staff right here, they do well. They do well, and I'm really happy to have them on staff. But actually, I really want to recognize my support team at home. Wave. That's my support team at home. Okay. They've been with me the whole entire time. My sister, my partner in crime, my brother. That's my little brother, and my husband. Many of you don't know, but we met here in 1985. Yeah, he was working here and I was working here. That's my husband and my soulmate, and it's been real good, real good. And that one over there in the corner, that's my hero. That's my daddy. That's my hero. He supported me when I first started out on this adventure, and he still supports me, and I really appreciate that. I just want to say really to NCTD that I came here when I came here, and I'm like, okay, what am I doing? I don't know. But I didn't stay because I had to. I stayed because I wanted to. It's been a really, really good career for me. I didn't know, but I do now. Just tops, okay? I appreciate it. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Ms. Cynthia. Thank you. Okay, so the next person is Mr. Lawrence Gum. He's not able to be here today, but he joined NCTD in 1979. Larry, as we call him, has 40 years of fleet maintenance as a fleet maintenance technician. He has distinguished himself from many of the technicians by having performed work on 11 different models of buses throughout the years. And we want to thank Larry for his mechanical and engineering skills on keeping the NCTD bus fleet rolling. And next is Ms. Sharon Bourbeau. Hey, Ms. Sharon joined NCTD in 1979. Sharon has served our riders for 40 years. Sharon has done it all: coach operator, behind the wheel trainer, and the AM dispatcher. Sharon does an awesome job, and we want to thank her for making sure that our buses make the AM pull out every morning. Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, surprise.
All right, so can we just have another wonderful round of applause for these individuals? So we thank you all for letting us, recognize you today, and thank you again for your service. And that concludes our presentation. We're happy to take any questions.
Yes, and on behalf of the board, I would like to express our appreciation for all the service that you've provided. You are the face of this organization, and your service has really been greatly appreciated. For the millions of people that have moved through our system who depend on this service, your service has made a big difference. So thank you very much. I don't know if there are other board members who have any comments that they'd like to make, but thank you very much.
I do just want to say that Joanne does have a great running back grandson, so. But I have number 26 at El Camino.
Okay, thank you all. Moving on to consent items 2 through 14. Those 13 items on the agenda, do I have a motion? Motion by Board Member McNamara and a second by Board Member Jenkins.
On the motion of Board Member Paul McNamara, seconded by Board Member Sharon Jenkins to approve consent items 2 through 14, motion passes with all board members present voting yes. Board members Juker and Franklin absent.
Okay, thank you. Other business item number 15, Yun Park Lynch, our CFO, will review item 15.
Good afternoon, members of the board. We are here to present our proposed capital improvement program for the fiscal year 2021 to 2025. I have here with me Kristen Tuck. She's a capital program manager, and she leads the capital program here at NCTD. We present our capital program to our board every year on December, so we can be able to program our different projects in the regional transportation plan with SANDAG. So with that, I will let Kristen do most of the presentation today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So this is just a quick overview of the development of NCTD's annual capital improvement program. So the way we develop our program, we review current projects annually. We're looking at overall status, budget, and schedule, and funding estimate to completion. We then also hold a call for projects for any new project ideas, and we prioritize those projects based on state of good repair, cohesiveness with our transit asset management plan, whether that project is mandated by law or previously funded under contract. We then receive revenue forecasts, and we use that information to actually develop the proposed CIP based on our criteria. That is then approved by the Board of Directors and also submitted to SANDAG for inclusion in the Regional Transportation Improvement Plan. And then we program the funds through our financial and project management tool. So NCTD is required to update the 5-year CIP on an annual basis. A final list of approved projects are submitted to SANDAG and for incorporation into the RTIP. And per federal requirements, projects must be included in the RTIP in order to be eligible for funding. NCTD provided its recommended projects for the FY21 through 25 CIP to SANDAG on December 18th, so yesterday. NCTD may update its recommended project listing during the annual FY21 operating budget and capital improvement program development process, particularly if federal apportionments differ from estimates. And SANDAG, pursuant to Senate Bill 1703, is responsible for major capacity enhancing projects for the transit operators in the region. Historically, NCTD has not included these projects within its 5-year CIP. However, these projects are critical to NCTD achievement of a state of good repair. And in a few slides, we will actually look at those projects and the current unfunded amount. So this slide shows the district's unconstrained needs of approximately $289 million. The unconstrained baseline captures all of project needs, including those projects NCTD has funded in the constrained baseline, which we'll review later in the presentation. But as you can see, the majority, 58% of the district's needs are related to bus and rail rolling stock in order to maintain our assets in a state of good repair, followed by support equipment and facilities and transitway and lines, both at 19%. So to highlight or summarize some of the major projects included in the unconstrained baseline, $89 million is needed for the replacement of 7 coaster locomotives and 1 passenger car that have reached the end of their useful life, and the expansion of 2 train sets consisting of 2 locomotives, 8 rail cars, and 2 rail cab cars to support increased frequency service. $21 million for overhaul of coaster passenger cars and Sprinter DMU vehicles. $53.2 million in Breeze and Flex replacement buses. $54.4 million to support right-of-way improvements, including bridge replacements and construction of stabilization measures on the Delmar Bluffs. There's a need for $21 million in state of good repair facilities projects and expansion of the East and West divisions to support zero emission buses and equipment, as well as facility modifications for the new Charger locomotives. $14.8 million to design and construct a new maintenance of way and general administrative office buildings. $10 million for the implementation of wayfinding signage, $3.9 million for the regional fare system, and $1.5 million in non-revenue vehicle replacement to support operations and maintenance. So this list represents the Sandag managed NCTD projects. As you can see, half of the Low Sand Corridor Capital Program is funded through Sandag's 5-year CIP. However, $723 million is still needed to complete these projects. I will turn it over to you to discuss grant revenues and use of grant funds. Oh,
because you,
sure.
you shot past that one a little
Okay.
bit. And that's an important slide. So this is the capacity enhancing projects that Sandag is advancing under the Transnet program, by and large for NCTD. The key piece for board members to keep in mind is that if you look at any of these projects, they capture a state of good repair project. Like the bridge that's in by the fairgrounds, that bridge has to be replaced. And so it's critical that we receive the funding. So if you marry the $722 million in terms of money that's needed for the Sandag program, plus the NCTD program, and you're just talking about the 5-year needs, then you get to the $1 billion. This doesn't include, for example, the tunnel discussion in Delmar or other different permeations of projects that are outside the 5-year window. So I just want to make sure you guys got the scale and scope of what we're talking about. We have to separate it this way based upon what happened with the peace legislation. But it's important for you to know that if Sandag doesn't come up with that money to fund those projects, we would have to figure out how to fund the state of good repair element of this project.
Thank you, Matt.
On the previous slide, on the previous slide, maintenance of way in general administration office buildings. So the maintenance of way is what?
That's track and signal. So right now we lease a facility out in Oceanside, and we're looking at purchasing a facility. The general administration building is this building that you're in. This building requires a significant amount of work to bring it up to a state of good repair. So we determined that it's more cost effective to replace it. And we're looking to replace it as part of the Oceanside Transit Center project to relocate at that site.
And then has this board acted on that or voted on that yet? Or I don't know.
Well, we have not gotten proposals. We have not gotten proposals back,
Okay.
But we've shared with the board in previous years the analysis. Just so you know, Jim, we've gone out a couple of times for rehabilitation of this building, and the rehabilitation costs for this building don't equate out in comparison to just building a new building.
Okay, so that's on your unconstrained needs. Is that part of this? I don't see it, I guess.
No, it's not. So the project is actually not funded. So they were just giving you some examples. So that this slide and those other slides are examples of projects that are in the list.
Okay.
The actual funded list of projects is in the back and detailed by year.
And then on this one, the funded, on the columns one, sorry. The next page, I'm jumping around on you. That the Sandag CIP funded amount, this is that Sandag's already committed to fund
Right.
between now and 2025.
Right.
Okay, and then the unfunded amount is the balance that necessary, I guess, to complete these projects.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So as part of the capital improvement.
Thank you. I was waiting for the chair to call me through the chair. I have 2 questions. So Matt, you mentioned the Delmar Bridge replacement, and a lot of our board has not been, we had a discussion just a little while ago about the fact that they had not been on the board for very long. So they may not be aware of why that bridge needs to be replaced. Can you just briefly, I know age and.
One of the, I mean, obviously is age, age primarily, because that bridge, I think is what, 90? Yeah, early 40s. We've had to step in and do some projects to extend the life of that bridge. It's also been identified as a bridge for double tracking to support future needs, and it's also identified as a bridge where we would put a special events platform. But the key piece for NCTD, you know, if you were to drop off the capacity enhancing piece or the platform, that bridge has to be replaced.
And is there a sea level rise issue with that bridge as well?
Oh, I
Currently basically at the higher storm level, so in whether we replace the bridge individually and or if it goes to the San Diego level track project, that bridge will be raised at about 6 to 10 feet, and then actually lengthen.
Yeah, can you come up and use the mic?
Well, Matt,
There's several features on that bridge that deserve some discussion. The first one is that bridge has washed away twice in the past. It washed away back in 1916 when we had what we term the 100-year flood in San Diego, and it washed away again in 1927. The issue with the bridge is it's a scale critical bridge. And what that means is when they built those bridges 100 years ago, the pile driving equipment couldn't drive the piles deep enough into the ground, or they didn't know they didn't know how much scale potentially they could get in a major storm. So the piles go about 30 feet into the ground. And when we have when we model the 100-year flood across that bridge, the scour is over 20 feet. So the scour means that the river will wash 20 feet of the ground away under that bridge. It's called scour. And that's one of the most destructive forces in a major flood. So it's very old and it's scour critical. They would be the two main reasons to replace it. It could be, if it was washed away next week, it would take 6 months to replace it.
That bridge also, as part of the lagoon restoration, they changed the dynamics of the tidal effects as well, and so it got worse, right?
Yeah, so we got mitigation from the Southern California Edison to put fiberglass piles around the wood piles. So the wood piles are protected from the marine borers now, also the fiberglass encasement, but you can't make the piles deeper unless you replace them. And that's the critical factor on the bridge, or the risk. It's a risk. Have to build a new bridge next to the existing bridge.
kind of like build NCC with the, yeah. So is it on the unconstrained or the constrained list?
No, it's unfunded. So
Okay.
it's a project right now that Sandex is the lead agency for the funding
Mhm.
and the construction of that project. And you will see that a significant amount of Sandex program going forward does not have the funding, the match, or the other part of it to implement those projects.
So what's the time horizon? You know, I mean, really, I hear if it gets washed away next week, it would take.
Well,
us-
how about this? We can, rather than taking this item in this way, because
it in the
this is really about
budget.
the funding, we can come back with a presentation that will focus in on these projects about when they were supposed to come online, because some of these projects have been completely designed and are actually construction ready, but just don't have the money. But let us come back to you so that we keep this agenda item on point.
Okay.
And over 90% design, and we've also got all the permits to replace that bridge. So we're in a good position to be ready by the next year to replace that bridge.
If you had the money.
Should the funding turn up.
Mhm.
So as part of the capital program, we don't only identify those projects that are as part of unconstrained projects, but we also have to determine which of those projects we can actually fund based on a known funding sources. So during this process, we gather the different funding sources that are pretty much on a recurring basis, happen each year. And this is what this graphic shows. We also take into account any discretionary grants that we have, we expect to be awarded for, and there's a highly likelihood. In this case, you can see in this table that the Carl Moyer is one of those assumptions. We have already been awarded $10 million for the first set of 5 locomotives. And then we are expecting notice early next year from Carl Moyer whether or not they're going to be able to award some funding for the remaining 2 locomotives for the total of 7 locomotives. Most of the funding here has been is based on the revenue projections that were prepared by SANDAG as part of the fiscal year 2020 budget process. We will get final numbers from SANDAG and FTA apportionments probably around January and February next year. So if there's any changes as part of the approval process from our operating budget, we'll present those to the board in June, probably in June or May of next year. One of the things I also kind of want to point out is that a lot of times these grants have a lot of restrictions. So as part of programming funds for different projects, we have to be mindful of the restrictions of some grants. For example, for the Federal Transit Administration, we have some grants that are specifically geared just for bus purchases, and we cannot use those funding, for example, for right-of-way or for rail projects. We also have some issues as far as whether or not some of these projects can follow federal procurement rules. We are not federal procuring our locomotives, so we have to program only local funds to purchase those locomotives. So there's a lot of putting pieces of the puzzle together. We understand what are our projects, we understand what are our priorities, but we also have to be mindful of how many, what revenue projections we have for the next 5 years and what are the restrictions for those revenue sources. I just kind of want to point out here that our biggest funding sources are obviously Transportation Development Act, TDA, that's funding that comes from sales tax. And also we have Transnet and Federal Transit Administration, FTA, which can only be used for capital projects and for preventive maintenance expenses. And here from our funding sources, for grants only, what we're trying to demonstrate is the percentage from those grants that will be used for different purposes. We are projecting, or we are actually proposing to use 27% of a total grant funding for capital program, 25% for preventive maintenance, and 48% for operations. The vast majority of those fundings for operations will come from TDA and from Transnet. We cannot use federal monies for operating expenses, only for capital or for preventive maintenance expenses.
Does that pie chart represent the entire 5-year amount, the 664 million?
Yes.
Okay.
So then, all right, I'm just trying to relate this back to your other chart of what's funded and what's not funded. So looks like over the 5-year program, you're going to get 600 million, 600 and whatever it was.
180.
664 million.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah, but, yeah.
is that where does that fall on this chart where you've got the funded and unfunded? Is that where do those? And I realize some of those there's strings attached on and can only go to certain projects, but does that not help aid the funding in your 2015 that you've already got? Where are those grant monies accounted for in your list of what's paid for and what's not?
Out of that total out of the total revenues of $664 million, we have to utilize 48% for operating expenses. That includes purchase transportation, cost of fuel, cost of utilities, salaries and wages.
Okay, so you have to use 48% for operations, and then the rest of it possibly can be used for these capital improvement projects?
27%, and then we also have to use 25% for preventive and maintenance expenses, which include, for example, bridge inspections, small overhauls for vehicles, maintenance for software, maintenance for buildings, maintenance for facilities.
Okay, so 27% can be used for capital projects.
Correct, and we are required by Budget Policy 17 and also by SANDAG to have a balanced operating budget. So as part of the process, we also project what our operating expenses are going to be to ensure that we have a balanced budget for fiscal year 2021.
Okay, so where would, I guess the 27%, I don't know what 27% of 644 million is, about 180 million or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
200, so that would then could go towards some of these unfunded projects.
No, that's already part of the constraint baseline
Where
that
do
we
they
are.
go?
So if
Yeah.
if you look, there's an attachment in the agenda item. If you open it up.
And in 2 slides, Matt, we're actually going to address the constraint baseline.
Oh yeah, so
okay,
you're about to get there in terms of the specific projects, but there are also the attachments included in the board agenda item that break out the detail of where those dollars are going to a line item. So it's not the case we just go, here's a lump sum of money and we're just going to spend it. All of these projects have to be specifically identified and programmed, and included in the regional STIP tip in order for those projects to be funded. So if you look at attachments 13, let me put my glasses, 15C, you'll start seeing the specific projects that are funded.
Okay, it just,
I got you.
numbers come flying so fast. I can't think as fast as you can speak. So, thank you. Yeah, well, it's a lot easier. That's a lot easier.
So I think these next few slides will address that too. So the key capital priorities for the district and what's reflected in our 5-year CIP include the purchase of 7 locomotives that have reached the end of their useful life. The estimated to replace the estimated cost to replace these Tier 0 and Tier 2 emissions locomotives with Tier 4 vehicles is $7 million per unit, so totaling $49 million, excluding commissioning costs. And NCTD will be replacing 1 bi-level passenger car and overhauling the remaining cars. And then Sandag will be funding 2 train sets to expand NCTD's coaster fleet size to 9. The various Sprinter overhauls include HVAC units, car body brake systems, gearboxes, and cabinet upgrades. NCTD has 74 Breeze buses that have reached the end of their useful life, and the estimated cost to replace the 74 buses with CNG buses is $52 million. And NCTD has 5 railroad bridges that have reached the end of their useful life. Bridge 286 is actually going to be funded in FY20, and the estimated cost to replace the Rose Canyon and San Onofre bridges is approximately $17 million. Thank you. All right. So with a constrained baseline of $182 million over the next 5 years, based on revenue estimates, 52% will be allocated to rail and rolling stock projects, followed by 30% to bus rolling stock, and 11% to rail transit ways and lines to support state of good repair needs and increase coaster and Sprinter frequencies. And that's all this chart shows. So this graph illustrates the ratio of the constrained capital program against the unconstrained needs. So as you can see, based on current funding estimates, NCTD is not even able to fund half of those needs. Oops, sorry. And when we look at the cumulative effect, the unconstrained gap widens significantly. So this is a list of projects NCTD has deemed a priority for fiscal year 2021. As previously mentioned, those priorities include the Breeze CNG fleet replacement, coaster locomotives, Bridge 257-2, and equipment for the new fare revenue system. And this pie chart illustrates where NCTD has focused its priorities for FY21. Again, the majority of funding being allocated to rail and bus rolling stock. So as we discussed, there are critical unfunded projects. It's important to note that these projects are not funded in the FY21 through 25 CIP. $34.6 million is needed to support right-of-way improvements, including construction of stabilization measures on the Delmar Bluffs. Our CIP assumes that the state will continue to appropriate funding for this critical project. We did receive $6 million in FY 2020. $1.5 million is needed in non-revenue vehicle replacement to support operations and maintenance. $13.9 million to design and construct the new maintenance of way and GAO buildings. $17.3 million in state of good repair facilities projects and expansion of the east and west divisions to support zero emission buses and equipment, and $8 million for the implementation of wayfinding signage. So with that, we ask the board to please approve the proposed FY21 through 25 CIP budget based on estimated federal and non-federal funding levels, to forward a recommendation to the Sandag Board of Directors to approve the proposed FY21 CIP for inclusion in the 2020 RTIP, and approve the Transnet funds to be used for operating expenses with a pledge that the district will expend the funds in compliance with the requirements of the Transnet ordinance and expenditure plan. Thank you.
Anthony, do we have any public comment on this item?
No, sir.
All right. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Vice Chair Feller.
Thank you. The, getting back to the
Maintenance of way?
maintenance away in the GAO. It looks like that's in the plan to do something soon. And I'm interested, very interested in what soon means.
Well, the MOW building, we are advancing the design on that building right now. And so once the design is complete on that and we've identified the location, likely out of a pot of funds that is kind of earmarked, the state money that we received for Amtrak service operations on our corridor and on-time performance incentive, we would likely use those dollars to fund the maintenance away building rather than continuing to lease in perpetuity. So that's one piece of it. We're looking to see, once we put the bid out, the procurement out for the Oceanside Transit Center, we've included in there our request for to have that building, our new building at that location as part of that project. And we're waiting to see what the proposers come back with in terms of types of proposals that are submitted to us. Once we see their proposal and what that means for us in terms of dollars, then we will figure out what are the next steps. Obviously, we are assuming as we move forward that with that proposal coming back, it will put us into a position to figure out, okay, are we going to sell this building as an example and take those dollars and reinvest it towards the new building? Are there other dollars that we could bring to the table? So we're going to play all of those things out. We're going to be looking at also if there are opportunities for us to set aside some money to help offset some of those costs.
Oh, I'm sure the proposals that will come back on that building, on that transit center, you know, you're supplying them a lot of land.
Right.
And so there's got to be some good deal in it.
Right, but just getting, without going too far afield on it, the balance always for us is making that capital investment versus and taking the benefit of that, because you could choose to do that, or you could try to capture the maximum value back in terms of lease payment back to the district for that property development. So we're gonna have to balance all of those things out, but until we get a proposal, we don't have to make that decision.
And the maintenance away, do we ever consider that spot just north of Harbor Drive?
Well, no, we've looked at some locations and we're focused in on property that we own, and we need to try to centrally locate it on the rail line so that you could get access to the Sprinter and to the coastal subdivision, including downtown San Diego, in a quick manner. So one of the locations we are looking at is actually in Del Mar. That was situated. There's another location in San Marcos. So everywhere we're going to be looking is primarily where we own property to take advantage of property we already own.
Thank you.
Member Desmond.
Thank you. Saw me pushing my button. Thanks. So in the recommendation is for the Sandag board to approve the 2021 CIP, which is a 15C, and the operating expenses of 15B. Are these for inclusion in the 2020 RTIP? So I guess my question is everything in 815B and C we have the money for? Or are these monies, are these part of the unconstrained?
Everything that we're submitting to Sandag is what we reasonably anticipate that we're going to receive in terms of funding. So this is the good faith estimate that we are required to make based upon known revenues.
Okay, I was just curious if we needed, we're asking for more than the revenue.
No.
All right, cool. Well, I'll make a motion to approve then.
Okay. Is that a motion? Motion Desmond and second by Edson.
Oh, look, I already voted. That was the last time.
On the motion of Board Member Jim Desmond, second by Board Member Joel Edson to approve agenda item number 15, motion passes with all board members present voting yes. Board Member Druker, absent.
Okay, thank you all. Moving on to informational items, number 16. As you are all aware, we've had a lot of activity on the Delmar Bluffs. So we thought it appropriate to have Mr. Fordham and Mr. Smith make a presentation on the Delmar Bluffs.
So as you're all probably aware, we had quite a bit of rain over Thanksgiving that caused us some erosion problems in Delmar. So the first thing I'll speak about is the emergency project we did over the last, that Stephen and I did over the last couple of weeks. Then we'll give you an update on Delmar Bluffs Project 4, an update on projects 5 and 6, a brief discussion on the advanced planning study, and item 6 is meant for the Sandag board, I'm afraid. I missed that edit. So we can see from this map, we had 2 areas where we had quite a cloudburst over Thanksgiving. They were both in the north end of the bluff, up near Seagrove Park. As we can see on this slide, which I've shown before, the orange areas are where we had bluff retreat problems over the last winter, and those 2 red areas are where we had it over Thanksgiving. So we had what's termed an atmospheric river, and I took a screenshot from my phone when that was going on Thanksgiving morning. Basically, we had 2 months of rain fell in 2 days over Thanksgiving, so it was quite a high rainfall. We're going to look and see what sort of rain event it was statistically, but that's the ballpark what happened. This is a photo of what happened below 14th Street. Basically, so much water came down the hill from Delmar, down the end of 13th and 12th Street, that it overwhelmed the size of the drainage swales, and it went straight over the top of the tracks, as you can see there. So it wasn't so much a bluff failure, it was just an erosive scour event that happened because of the rain. We were able to get Mid-Coast Transit contractors mobilized the next day. They had all the equipment that was needed for the repair, so we brought them up from the Mid-Coast project. And the first repair they did there at 14th Street, basically, we put some steel plates in behind the existing piles and filled it with a sand cement concrete slurry.
Bruce, can you go back a
Yeah.
slide? And I think if you describe that picture on the left, it looks like there are I-beams that are pounded into the bluff.
Right, yeah. So there's 7 or 8 I-beams here. They were put in the bluffs in 1996.
And between I-beams, we had railroad ties.
Railroad tie lagging.
And that's what was holding it up. And then the water scoured away the soil and displaced the railroad ties.
Yeah, so it scoured away the soil to such a depth underneath that the bottom tie fell out. And then the next one and the next one.
Yeah, it was basically just undermining everything. So, and like Bruce said, the soil got saturated behind that wall and then undermined it, and that's where we lost those ties.
And the interesting bit in researching this, John Eschenbach told us when he was out there, he put those H-piles in 1996. And again, it was a Thanksgiving weekend storm. And they had 1.6 inches of rain that Thanksgiving, and we had, I think, 2.4 this Thanksgiving. So it happened in exactly the same place as it did in 1996. Yeah.
Well, essentially, just the water builds up on one side of the tracks, and the ballast is somewhere around the size of my fist, and so the water can just kind of seep and run through that, and then it just finds a low spot and then starts eroding underneath that. And that's how it eroded the track and behind the embankment behind that wall. Yeah. Yeah. So those piles are probably about 40 feet deep, and they're basically, the H piles are big concrete I-beams or H-beams. that are drilled down and then encased in concrete. But the plates, then the repair that we had done, we dug down to roughly where we found the Del Mar Formation, which is a harder geological formation that was about 8 feet down. So those plates are 8 to 10 feet down. Those plates are 8 feet wide and 10 feet deep. So we placed 2 8-foot by 10-foot by 1-inch thick plates in each location. And as Bruce said, backfilled it with a cement slurry.
Solid as a rock now.
Yes.
And then a little bit further north, opposite Seagrove Park, again, the water went over the track again at this location, and the damage was a little bit more severe here. We had, I think we got 7 piles exposed. We lost about 6 feet of bluff at this location. And again, the water went over the top, through the ballast, and washed the face off the bluff. We were fortunate in that piling system that we designed back in the year 2000, when I first came here to NCTD, that piling system was designed exactly to do that. We've got 250 odd piles in the bluffs, and we didn't know exactly where a failure would occur, but we knew where the worst regions of the bluff were and where the highest likelihood of a failure would be. So that's why the piles aren't continuous on the whole 1.5 miles. There's just piles on about 2,500 feet of bluff. So the soil arches behind the pile, and so the piles effectively hold the track in place. So that prevented a catastrophic failure. If those piles hadn't have been there, we wouldn't be running trains today. We would have been in full-scale emergency, having to go out and put new piles in and do a full-scale repair. So we were very lucky that the system worked. This is a photo of, it just shows what it looked like sunset on Sunday. I took that photo just as the sunset on Sunday. Mid-Coast Transit contractors did a fantastic job. They mobilized. We worked with them for 10 days. We had our design consultants working with the contractor. So there was a joint effort in terms of a constructible design that the contractor could build in 2 days. And it would serve the purpose that the designer wanted it to serve.
On this one, the lower left photo, those gentlemen that are working on those piles, they are drilling into those piles to insert reinforcement bar, right?
Yeah.
And so those piles now have rebar in between them where you did that wall right there, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so they were drilling the dowel bars into the piles, and there's 2 cages of reinforcement. There's a mat cage close to the soil, and then there's a deformed bar cage on the outside. And so the concrete's at least 1 foot thick, and then they put a rock sculpted finish on it, and it's got Mesa Buff color agent in it, which was the color approved for the North Coast Corridor by the Coastal Commission. So when the concrete dries, the color should lighten up a little bit to a brownish color to match the bluffs. So, potentially. So that's what happened there. And we helped Matt draft up an emergency declaration where we said we wanted to spend $5 million on what we consider emergency work. So what that work consists of, if you look at the photo on the left, there's a very nice concrete channel that was put in here in the late 90s. We need to take this channel and put it right along through the whole length of these tracks so that we can effectively drain the water more positively away from the tracks and prevent it going over through the ballast. And the second thing we want to do is, rather than wait till we have an emergency and put the lagging beam, the wall between the piles, we think we should put those walls in now in the next 12 months so that when we have another cloud burst like we had, there's very small chance of us, interrupting the train service again. So that's, if people thought that the 5 million was a high number for that 2 weekends worth of work, it's really for more than just the 2 weekends worth of work. So see the concrete, there's a concrete ditch here that goes from 6th Street down to Anderson Canyon. And so the water positively drains away from the tracks. The rest of the bluff, we've just got earthen ditches. And so what happens, every time it rains, a little bit of sediment accumulates And then the water sits near the track. And then when you get a heavy rain, it overflows through the track. We should put a ditch like this all the way along here, from here back to Coast Boulevard, a trackside ditch. There's an existing ditch up here, but the trackside ditch, we need to have a secondary protection there. Steve, do you want to?
Well, the ditch is fairly significant. I think the width at the bottom is probably 4 to 5 feet, and then it tapers out. So we're looking at something that's probably over at the top and at track level over 10 feet wide. And that's just basically to have the capacity to hold the volume during severe storm events that we receive, and then the run-on water that comes from the residential streets and properties.
There are some drains in there as well, and you know, when you get the soils, the sediment that moves and the scrub that comes down with the rain, they get blocked, and that's when you end up with the problem that we had the other day.
Yeah, initially when we have like a significant rain event, and we really haven't had any rain events until the Thanksgiving one. So anything that would be, say, like Chairman Kranz had indicated, that anything that's in the gutters or something like that still has that potential effect to clog drainage grates, and then sediment clogs on top of that, and then it's just kind of a snowball effect where it just overflows, and then water finds its low spot to migrate through the ballast and then over the side of the bluff. We have maintenance every like continuously out there, but it sometimes where there's 2.5 inches of rain, it's in the evening, it's probably difficult to, I guess, keep up. Yes. Yeah.
Does that divert a long way away from the drain bed?
Well, most of the
on the south end.
Well, for this south end, this ditch basically, like Bruce said, it starts at 6th Street and then discharges water into a storm drain outfall at Anderson Canyon, which eventually ends up on the beach. So that's basically all man-made structure. And then north of 6th Street, we have multiple inlets that either collect water from the residential streets, go through some old aged drainage channels and systems, and then make it into some culverts that are within the NCTD right of way that then drain that down to the bottom of the beach as well. But there's some other facilities out here that have probably been in, they're over 100 years old and need to be either rehabilitated.
So let's go on. So we finally have got the funding, all the funding in place now for Project 4. Last week we got the funding agreement signed with the state for the balance of funds. So what happened when we bid the project, the bids came in above the budget. So we had a funding shortfall, so we had to go back to the state and request additional funds. So we've now got all the extra funds we needed for Project 4. We've issued the notice of intent to award to the contractor. And so the contract's with the contractor for signature and getting the insurance and documents. So we will be hoping to start work in January on Project 4. No, we had an estimate of 1.7, I think, for the construction, and the bids came in at something like 2.8 or something, 2.5. But Senator Atkins agreed that we could take the money we had for the design of Project 6 and use it for the construction of Project 4. So we're using the California National Resources Grant. And then that brings us to Project 5. We've also got from Senator Atkins, we have the money now to start the design on Project 5, which will be starting in January. We're going to completely reevaluate the drainage system on the bluffs. We will reevaluate the stabilization needs. We're going to work with the Scripps Institute of Oceanography and get their LiDAR surveys they've been doing on the face of the bluff, so we can get a better picture of what the bluff retreat's been over the last 20 years, because they've got quite good measurements of what's happened recently. We want to build the wall. So some of this work I talked about as the emergency is also overlapping with Project 5. We want to build the wall on the top of all the piles to prevent another outage of the track. And so we're looking at around a $24 million construction amount of money that we're seeking at the moment. We're putting an application in for with the Department of Transportation for a state of good repair grant. It's going in, I think, in the next week or two. So we're optimistic that hopefully we can get this project funded this year for construction. This is an example of one of the structures we want to replace. This is a 1912 storm chute. If you go out and have a close look at it, the rebar's sticking out the side of it. It's been there over 100 years on the coast, and it's in need of, we'll replace it with a pipe, put a pipe underneath the tracks and a new inlet structure. And then that brings us to Project 6. And the reason we've separated Project 5 from Project 6, Project 5, the work is basically all in the railway right-of-way. It's a relatively simple project to get permitted. In Project 6, we're going to try and slow down the rate of bluff retreat, which means we'll have to build structures on the beach. So that we'll have to do a complete environmental document to do this project, and that will take several years. So rather than try and do everything as one project, we strategically broke it into 2 projects so that we could do the most urgent work again in Project 5, and then try and if we can slow up the rate of bluff retreat by looking at the soft areas on the beach and putting extra structures down there, we can vastly increase the service life of the railway on the bluffs. And we know that the alternative is a tunnel, which is going to cost billions of dollars. It will take a long time to get that money organized. So we think it's important to try and stabilize this bluff as best we can until the ridership's there and the need is there for a tunnel. So that's our sort of strategy. But we're also looking at, we did a very high level look at what we could do Hassan wants us to speed up the coaster and get to downtown faster. So we did a very high level, just plotted a couple of alignments on the map. We could, at the moment we're running at 50 miles an hour through Del Mar. We could put a 125 mile an hour tunnel through there, go straight under the Del Mar Canyon from the San Diego Bridge and come out in Sorrento Valley. It would double the speed of the trains going through that area, but it's going to cost a couple of $1 billion. But we're going to start studying that also this year in our advanced planning studies. Billions, yeah. So in summary, we're still trying to figure out how to fund this $5 million emergency project. Matt's promised to help us with that. Del Mar 4 is funded, 5 is funded for design, but we need construction money. 6, again, the cost of projects 5 and 6 will also depend on what design life we choose to design this work for. If we design a 25-year solution, it'll cost less. If we design a 100-year solution, it'll cost more. So that's something that the working group will be working on with us to decide how many years of service life do we want to put into the bluffs. And again, we've got $3 million allocated by our board for this advanced planning study to look at the higher speed alignments. So there's a lot happening around Del Mar. Does anyone have any questions for Stephen and I?
Before we go into questions, I did want to mention Bruce talked about a working group, and we had a meeting in Del Mar yesterday. Board member Edson was able to join us, and it was included. Transportation Secretary Kim came down from Sacramento. We had Senator Atkins, Assembly Member Gloria, as well as Assembly Member Tasha Burr Horvath, and then a number of different agencies were represented as well. Secretary Kim is leading an effort to put together a formal working group that would include most of the people that I just mentioned, plus many others. So the goal is to
kind of approach this in a true two-track way. One is to look at the short term, which if you see this funding summary, would get us through Delmar Bluff 6, and it would address the issue that Bruce just mentioned with regard to the length of time that would be required to stabilize the bluffs. In other words, how long we think we can, it will take to come up with the alternative proposal, tunneling or whatever the alternative ends up being. So it will be a pretty important effort. Obviously, NCTD has a seat at the table with Matt and Chair. There will be Sandag reps. Secretary Kim did express his desire to see this process come from the region up, as opposed to something that is imposed upon the region by the state. So pretty important initial meeting yesterday, and I look forward to seeing the group put together. Like I said, it's two-track. There's the short term and then the long term, which Bruce showed the slide that will, I think, keep everybody pretty actively engaged in terms of the Bs, the billions that it would take to get the trains off the bluff. So if you have any other questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you. So my question, Bruce, you mentioned something about soft spots on the bluff or soft spots at the base of the bluffs. And I don't know if you were talking about Project 5 or Project 6, but about creating some structures on the beach that might protect them. By that, are you talking seawalls, or have you considered doing sand replenishment in those areas, something that's a little more friendly to coastal?
You know, this is something we'll have to work through with the working group, but we will ask our consultants to consider all reasonable alternatives, which we have to do to go through the environmental process. I would envisage that we would do, we would make sandstone. We would use sand, brown color agent and cement, and we would create something similar to sandstone.
To seawalls.
And instead of a seawall. If you create a soil cement structure that mimics sandstone, it can look like sandstone. It can act like sandstone. It can prevent, what happens in several areas of the bluff, you've got canyons that have been filled in. And in those areas, we've got wooden walls at the moment. And off the ends of those wooden walls, you can see in several places, the wooden walls need to be extended. So we could extend the walls with wooden walls like that's there now, which would be, you know, a temporary fix that would give us another 50 years. We could cover those walls with, you know, a soil cement shotcrete that looks like a bluff. The worst extreme is you could put a concrete splash wall there. But all those alternatives will need to be considered before we can get the permits to do the project.
So are the soil cement shotcrete that you're talking about, are they the same as erodible concrete? Because I know that we
so you wouldn't use such a higher cement content that you use in a structural reinforced shotcrete solution. You use less cement. You could use 5 or 10% cement rather than 20 or 30% cement. And so it's not as hard. It won't last forever, but it won't look as bad as a reinforced concrete wall.
Well, I have a little bit of experience being from a coastal city, and we've had situations where council in my city approves a seawall with erodible concrete because we think that that's something friendlier, and then coastal won't approve it because there aren't enough studies to prove that it erodes at the same rate as the existing bluff. Hopefully we'll be able to get around those type of situations.
And I guess let me comment a little bit on this, because here's what my concern is. One of the reasons I believe we're at the point that we are was that for all of these years, there's been a discussion about funding a tunnel. I know when I got here, the tunnel was in the 2030 plan. Now it's at the back of the 2050 plan. And when I got here, I heard about the projects that were putting in the piles for 15 to 20 years. And at least on my watch, and I'm not going to make guesses and assumptions about infrastructure. I'm going to make sure the right infrastructure gets in place if the elected bodies vote to do something different. But I think it's a mistake for anyone to underestimate the difficulty of raising $5 billion plus to do a tunnel, and us building infrastructure that will require us to babysit it moment by moment. It's just not reasonable. It's not the way that we should operate and run a railroad. And I'm just going to stand firm on the fact that we need to make sure what's going to be sustainable for the railroad. If someone can show me $5 billion, I'm all about building a temporary project if you show me the $5 billion. But that's going to be a heavy, significant lift. The long-term project, I don't care what anyone says, will take you 20 to 30 years plus to get to a point where you could substantially advance that project. I've been involved in projects like the rail extension from to Dulles Airport. Took over 50 years of planning to get that project built, and right away that was mostly already dedicated above ground. Okay, so the complexity of what we're talking about, I would rather and prefer us not to try to push, and I don't think Board Member Edson was doing it, but we just need to be mindful. Let's work through what's going to be real and what's going to be sustainable from the temporary. And if you want to knock it down after you got something better, great, do that. But we need to build infrastructure that we can absolutely count upon being available to support the rail operations.
And I would like to add that, you see number one there, it's we had an emergency project, and I think that the board would benefit from essentially adopting an emergency posture when it relates to the Delmar Bluffs, because what we've seen is the accelerated rate of the bluff collapse. We know sea level rise is having an impact on that stretch, and that we need to get through 6, and then we can take a step back and engage this question about tunnels or not. The Coastal Commission will be a part of the working group, and I do know that the Coastal Commission, I'm confident that they will look at the situation that you described in Solana Beach, where a property owner was trying to put up a seawall to protect their property versus a critical transportation corridor in our state. And so I think if we continue to advocate in an effective way, that the Coastal Commission will understand why we need to make these, put in some infrastructure that in fact is not what they would normally consider approving. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and I think we should continue to advocate. Board Member Franklin.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you just said what I was going to say, but you said it in a far more tactful way than what I would say.
Well,
this is the most sensible thing that I've heard in a long time, because I've been saying for a long time, why don't we get up there and reinforce these things with some cement? The fact that you've got a way to do it with a porous material that's going to match the color, our cities and our agencies need to advocate to the Coastal Commission, and we need to use the bully pulpit that we collectively command to ask folks, is the rail system a priority? And if it is, then help us stop it from falling into the ocean. It's that simple. Am I missing something? We need to, really, am I missing something? That's
No.
really what it comes down to. So, we're so reserved in the way we speak about this, but that's what it comes down to. So this is a great idea. I'd go, I'd like to see it be a little bit more durable than the sandstone that's there. After all, isn't that the idea? And build some more of these drainage structures rather than trying to build the tunnel to nowhere. This is sensible. This is a sensible proposal. The drainage structures are a sensible proposal. As our executive director said, the tunnel is going to take 50 years, and we'll start at how many billion did you say?
3.5.
Yeah. So multiply that by 100, and we'll probably get the final cost of it, right? Thank you.
And we are moving forward with our advanced planning that will get us to a point where we can engage in a reasonable conversation with the Coastal Commission. So I think that you'll find that there will be some some serious consideration to what we propose.
Let's send some resolutions for our cities to pass and adopt in our councils. And who do we need to call? Do we need to get the news to come down here and cover the fact that, we have a choice between allowing the rail tracks to
I
fall
don't
into
think
the
we're
ocean?
there yet, but
Let us know
I
where
will
we
put
are,
that in
okay?
the back pocket and,
Right.
and we'll make sure you're out in front
Right.
when we're at that point.
I'm more than willing to look like
Okay,
a
thank
moron.
you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Board Member Desmond.
Just so, I think it's great that we should, we need to do all this, but we got to get a long-term plan. I mean, I think, and I know you're gonna come with one, but I guess I'd like to narrow it down to at least two options or something to that effect, or maybe even one if we can do that. But we need to be thinking in the long term, I think. And even though it could change many different times in many different ways, but if we don't at least have a plan, then that's got to be forthcoming, I think, out of this talk here, because the bluffs are going to go someday, and I think we got to be ready for that. So
Yeah, and I think no one disagrees. And in fact, I know Tony was there. I think Joe heard it. There's unanimous agreement about needing to do the stabilization and then do the long-term study. I just think on the long-term study piece, everyone just needs to let the alternatives analysis process take us to where we need to go. I think the mistake that people make, because I don't advocate for any one option over another option, I think you just have to lay out the different alternatives and see what alternatives gives you the best benefit. And I think the one thing from this, one of the benefits of this working group, it's going to allow everyone to see there is no magic pill project. Because I think people who think that a tunnel somehow tucks it under the pillow and you never have to see it, don't understand how underground tunnels work and the amount of noise and impact that they have outside of cost. So
that seems to be about the only alternative, or one of the
no,
alternatives.
it's one of.
I guess I'd like to see that. Is that process going on now?
Well, that's the study the $3 million study that Sandag was to look at options, but that's not necessarily the environmental study that's going to require you to look at all of the options. So are you going to look at all the options as part of that?
When we do Project 6, we'll have to consider all reasonable options that the permitting agencies want us to consider. So we don't get to choose, but the options that are on the table are some sort of seawall to stop the bluffs retreating. If we put a hard and fast wall there, the bluffs won't be retreating like they are today. The reason they retreat is the sea eats the bottom away, and then a few years later, the top falls down.
Okay.
And then we will look at stabilizing the bluff face, in other words, grading the face of the bluff where necessary, and planting trees and plants in it to slow down the rate with which it erodes in the rainstorms. Then we will look at building a bridge on the bluffs. That's one option. Building a trench on the bluffs is another option. Putting a tunnel under Camino del Mar is an option, and putting a tunnel straight under Crest Canyon to get the highest speed is the other option.
I guess I'd like to see a little more, I don't know if it's an emphasis or analysis on the alternatives, because eventually we're done shoring up the bluffs.
Yeah, well,
someday.
That's part of. So I was doing that in Project 6, but the advanced plan. So the other thing to remember is we can't just do this for Del Mar. We have to do this high-speed study for the whole corridor, because there's no point just doing a solution in Del Mar and then you get down to UTC and look at the Miramar tunnel and they don't match. One doesn't fit the other. So the advanced planning study has to do the whole corridor and look at how we would put a high-speed corridor through
Well, I
the
think
region.
that is, I mean, it's probably never going to happen in our lifetimes, but we need to, I think, have those studies and that in place so that when the time comes for implementation, we're ready for it. And I think the sooner we do that, the better, because, I don't mind fixing what we got, but it's sooner or later, it's just like a train set. You got to get rid of it and go to something else. So this is not going to last that long. So I would definitely like to see, I guess, more emphasis as opposed to just these or the other alternatives. We got to study some of those other alternatives a little more in depth.
Yeah, that's what we plan to do.
And don't count on Sandag to do it.
And Priya is much younger than us, so it might happen in her lifetime.
It might.
And I will say, Jim, that
Priya and Matt, yeah.
the working group, I don't know that there was a county.
This is the first I've ever heard of this working
Well,
group.
and so it was first proposed yesterday, and I think that if you're interested, I think they had every jurisdiction with the Losan corridor, so Oceanside, Carlsbad, Encinitas, Del Mar, Solana Beach were anticipated to be part of the working group. It would make a lot of sense for a member of the county board of supervisors to participate. You may want to
Get me on
follow
the
up.
email list.
Matt can put you in touch with whoever you need to if you're
I don't think
interested in.
Matt wants me, but okay.
Of course we want you, Jim.
That's fine. No, this is the first I've heard of it. I
All right.
didn't even know. Okay.
Any other questions? Vice Chair Feller.
80 million for and getting or I'm sorry, this 80 million's like $80 compared to 50 million instead of, I mean, once you
Billions.
add that up, that's a big difference in the $5 billion cost of these tunnels. And like you said, you can't just build a 125-mile-an-hour tunnel that only goes 10 miles.
Right, and I think that's what the advanced planning study would do, would identify all those alternatives and then see which, what alternatives best
Yeah.
match for the corridor and what kind of speeds we can get. And then probably what projects are practical, which feed into that to make it basically a faster.
And it might
more
be
time.
in 30
critical
years,
corridor.
the ocean will be receding anyway, so.
So who's doing the advanced planning study?
Linda Culp and myself.
Okay.
Linda will be leading it, but I'll be providing her engineering expertise. And
Okay.
we will put an RFP out to get the best team to do it.
So, okay, you're going to be leading, but you're, okay, put an RFP out because I'm afraid Sandag may not make this their biggest priority.
No, Linda and I, it's on Linda and I's, it's on our top to-do list. Yeah, but Linda's been the planning, she's been the principal planner longer than I've been around here. She's been doing it for 20 years, but she also does the bikes and she does a fantastic job at it all.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I would like to thank you. And I know you both have worked quite a bit, many hours on these emergency projects. So I appreciate all your efforts and keep our riders safe. So thank you very much.
That's our top priority.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, no vote required, informational item. And next question is, Mr. Tucker, do you have anything to report?
How about happy holiday season? We did include this report, executive director's report. We sent out separately an email saying that we were back to normal operations on the railroad. So things are progressing well after the storm event.
All right, board members have any comments or questions or?
I wanted to thank Matt and to thank staff for all of the updates that they did put out because as a, my city kisses Del Mar, where I can basically walk to where the bluff failures are in a half an hour from my house. And so there was a lot of social media chatter, and it was good to have things that I could put out there so that people's questions were answered in a real-time type of manner. So thank you so much to staff for putting all of that information out there. Other than that, I have a Losan thing if we're at that point.
Pardon me?
I have a Losan update.
Okay,
if we're
very
at that
good.
point.
Now's the time.
Okay, so on Monday, December 2nd, the Losan Executive Committee plus me and Greg Hart from Santa Barbara County Association of Governments met for discussion deliberation for a new managing director candidate. And I'm pleased to report that the committee has now approved and appointed Donna DiMartino as the new Losan Rail Corridor Agency Managing Director. Donna brings more than 30 years of demonstrated ability in delivering mission-critical projects, most recently serving as the CEO of the San Joaquin Regional Transit District.
Excellent. And we had a very successful Santa program, didn't we? Our trains, we sold out.
Yes.
Yeah. Very good. And it was very popular. I saw pictures galore on social media. That's part of that report there if you want to catch up. Again, you need to be quick on the website to get your tickets or it sells out fast. So, and I want to second the comment. I mentioned Mr. Fordham and Mr. Smith and their efforts in these emergencies, but Karen and Kimmy, you did outstanding work as well. So I appreciate all the efforts of everybody making it possible to get the repairs in place very quickly. All right, Anthony, do we have any remaining public speakers?
No, sir.
Okay, then the next scheduled meeting is January 16th of 2020 at 2 p.m. So we move into the next decade. And with that, happy holidays to everyone. This meeting is adjourned.
Happy holidays. So if
Yeah.
there was any other city that wanted, coastal city,